Morning, everyone who are on the West Coast, and good afternoon for those who are on the East Coast, and good night for those who are probably in Europe and the Asia. So we are very pleased to have Dr. Paul Santerre here with us from University of Toronto, who will give a talk about differentiating from fitting the health needs to this science versus fitting the science to the health needs, knowledge for success in go-to-market. A very exciting talk. But before we start Dr. Santerre's talk, there are a few housekeeping notes as usual. So first of all, if you have any questions during the talk, please write your questions in the question box. There's a question box in the bottom that you can write your questions in there. If you write your questions in the chat, then we'll probably miss your question, and then we will not be able to ask from our speaker. We also, there's a poll that is available. As usual, you can always participate in the poll and let us know about the talk, and then the organization of this talk, and then also some other questions. So these kinds of feedback that we receive from you will help us a lot for improving the quality of these e-seminar series. Also, if you have any questions about these e-seminar series, feel free to contact us. Our emails are available, and also you can follow us on Twitter. The last thing that I wanted to mention is that we couldn't do this, run this e-seminar series without the support of our sponsors. TransMedTech is one of our sponsors, which aims to support the development of innovative medical technologies, train the next generation of professionals, and make innovation in life sciences and engineering. TransMedTech provides an integrated environment that supports interdisciplinary collaborative processes and co-creation of new medical technologies and intervention to catalyze their development and adoption by users. We are also receive support from MedTech Talent Accelerator, and so with that, I would like to invite Professor Santerre to start his talk. But before I start, I wanted to give you an hour of introduction. He is actually takes a long time to introduce Dr. Santerre, so please bear with me. He has many achievements, and that is extremely impressive. Professor Santerre is an engineer. He's like me, an engineer who received his PhD from McMaster University in 1990 in the area of biomaterials design for blood contacting systems. He was the lead materials engineer on artificial heart program at the University of Ottawa Heart Institute prior to joining the University of Toronto in 1993. He was the Associate Dean of Research in the Faculty of Dentistry from 2003 to 2008, and then he became the director of the University of Toronto's Institute of Biomaterials and Biomedical Engineering from 2008 to 2013. So he has published many papers, more than 140 peer-reviewed publications, and more than 350 conference presentations and abstracts. And then most of his work is focused on investigating the relationship between polymers and biodegradation processes in the body in order to advance the design of new materials for tissue engineering, implants, and medical devices. He has it's a quite an achievement. It's very impressive. He has over 60 patents. That's very impressive and inspiring, actually, that a researcher can publish a lot of papers, but at the same time file patents. I know how difficult it is to file patents and get all of them closer to commercialization. And then he is the founder of Interface Biologics Institute, a U of T biotech startup, which has more than 20 employees. And this company is developing catheters and drug polymer coatings for medical devices. So Dr. Santerre is an international fellow of Biomaterials Science and Engineering, and in 2009, he became a fellow of American Institute for Medical and Biological Engineering. In March of 2010, he received the Julia Levy Award from the Canadian Society for Chemical Industry for translation of knowledge to product, and most recently, he was appointed as a fellow of American Association for the Advancement of Science. In 2012, he was the recipient of the NSERC Synergy Award, recognizing outstanding contributions to technology transfer activities with industry. So I need to drink something. Sorry it took a long time, but I mean, Paul, that's not my fault. Your CV is pretty strong and impressive. With that, I would like to invite Dr. Santerre to give a talk. And Paul, welcome. And the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So the hope here is that technology holds on my end and gets us through this today. It's a great privilege to be invited to give this internet talk. Very different world, talking here to a computer when I know there's other people out there listening on the backside. So hopefully I will be able to keep you engaged on this particular topic that I'm quite passionate about, translating research via entrepreneurship, which is very different. I mean, traditional roles of universities is to carry research on, license it out, and somebody else goes and does it. But we are entering an innovation economy that is nothing like we've ever seen before, particularly here in Canada, very conservative, which has been a very conservative bastion with regards to translating its research. And what a time to be doing it in the COVID-19 era. While it is creating carnage, it is also creating amazing opportunity. There is nothing better than a perturbation event to create opportunity. A perspective that I want to talk about specifically today is the concept of fitting health needs to the science when we undertake product development, as opposed to having the science and forcing it into a need. Having the healthcare need actually define the science that needs to be done to create the product. It is a mantra, is a concept that I have used over the past 2 decades or so in building companies that has spun out of our lab. And I hope it is a perspective that I can share with you today. This particular area is really exciting, of course. The medical device sector made up of about $423 billion in the growth market. And this doesn't include the biotech technologies area, still growing at a healthy 5%. But of course, the molecular biologics, therapeutics, and diagnostics growing it now at 25%, even though it's a smaller market size today. At that growth rate, there is huge opportunity for potential. So these are key reasons as to why the biomedical industry is ripe for opportunity for innovation and entrepreneurship, because the opportunities far outweigh the number of companies today that can actually deliver on that growth, in my opinion. Why is it so important for society? Well, you take a country like the US that's currently spending about 18% of its national GDP on healthcare, specifically 17.7% in 2019. So it's a real number. So take $5 American in your hand and take one of those dollars out of the whole national GDP, and that's all healthcare. That's not including, petroleum, transportation, agriculture, energy sectors, and whatnot. So it's an amazing chunk of your national operations to be spending. there. And Canada is not as bad, but certainly it's not a great picture either at 11.6% in 2019. There's many observers in the field that those numbers are so huge because of the inefficiencies of many technologies that are out there. So this creates a crisis opportunity for entrepreneurs. The opportunity to create innovative new solutions that could drive healthcare costs down will ultimately drive those companies to own and corner huge segments of market. The opportunities are huge. They range from applications in hospitals, nursing homes, diagnostic laboratories, pharmacies. Anybody who's been paying attention in Canada to the COVID-19 story, where we are planning to leverage off technologies into pharmacies for minor ailments, for COVID-19 vaccine delivery, and so on, would recognize the opportunity to deliver new products and services so that pharmacies can respond to this. Rehab centers. So the argument that inventors from academic and hospital institutions should steer away, or should I say rather, the argument that they should steer towards contributing to knowledge and entrepreneurial activities is significant, and to enable them to allow them to contribute their science to solutions for the healthcare sector. So I'm going to show you 3 case studies that kind of paint a little bit of my career and how we have looked at major problems and avoided trying to fit the device to a science, but rather ask the device what is needed and then go back to the lab, create the science to enable it. And this first application is focused on blood contact devices, and more specifically the catheter industry, which is huge. And the industry had a big desire by the late 90s to move away from drug coating systems to take on the challenges of coagulation in order to drive down the cost of catheters, because catheters were quickly becoming commodity in the sense of healthcare, not in the sense of everyday user products, but really low priced products where the margins would be low. In order for this to be achieved, these technologies would have to be easily integrated into existing manufacturing and show amazing stability on the shelf to be shipped around the world in order to create the high numbers in that market sector so that profits could be made because the margins were so low. So this was a drastic transformation from the way scientists were thinking about the problem as we emerged from the 1980s, gaining greater understanding of the coagulation pathway. The natural thing for us to do was to say, okay, let's take how Mother Nature is doing it scientifically, and that implies integrating highly unstable biology into products, very complicated manufacturing processes, which were just killing the industry. So the challenge was is to deal with these clots, which become really big problems. Every time there's a clot on a PICC catheter line, for instance, that costs about $15,000 US to sort out, not to mention the loss of life when it happens. There's an opportunity if a solution could come up here. This was in around 2001 when we started working on this, to save about $1 billion annually in the US alone if this problem could be licked. And the current technical challenges with the existing science was, of course, as I said a minute ago, the approach was to use anticoagulant coatings such as heparin and whatnot, which is effectively a biological. You now had to deal with problems and challenges of sterilization. On these particular issues, reproducibility were significant challenges. In many instances, the coatings had challenges with durability. In many instances, there was challenges with coating both the inside and the outside of the catheters with these systems. And we were also dealing with secondary reactions related to unique solvents or pre-chemical treatments on the catheters that had to be done in order to create the attachment of the biologicals. And then lastly, just getting a product through that has a biological on it creates a huge challenge for the manufacturers in terms of translation through the regulatory pathway. So our solution was quite simple. Could we chemically define an additive that would have diversity in chemistry, reflecting the diversity in chemistry of plasma proteins? Could we design that additive and throw it in as a chemical stable material, not a biological, made from chemistry with the same resilient stability of the polymer that we would be extruding to produce the product, and that as we actually made the product, the coating occurred. And that was our concept. We went back to the table, redesigned the chemistry that enabled all those features. We were already thinking about how the manufacturer had to make this thing at the time we were conceiving the concept. The results were quite amazing. This is a base polyurethane that we designed 3 different additives into. We're measuring here platelet attachment and accumulation. And you can see the image of platelets on the base polyurethane material, high activation state, and then the 3 different formulations. We didn't get quite right on this last one, some degree of activation. We had low platelet adhesion, but still activation. But here in these 2 formulations, you can see almost pristine platelets just sitting on the surface, not activated, as if they're swimming around blood. So these additives created amazing transformations. And when we went and applied it in the clinic, you can see the results here. This is a catheter material with our additive thrown in at a very small percentage, and this is the same catheter, and we chose materials that were reflective to commercial results. You can see the massive clotting here, and this is in vitro data, but we subsequently went on to, this stuff has been now in catheters since 2010, sold all around the world. And the clinical results are the same. We're getting 83 to 90% reduction in clotting on these systems. And with a reduction in clotting, we also reduce the propensity of the catheter lines to adhere bacteria, so we reduce infections. So the entrepreneurial pathway for us is drawn out for you here. You can see you still need to do science. You still need to have fundamental science, but then you take that science and you need to tailor it to create new science, new applied science to create the product. And this is what was done around 2020, 2000, is when we had the patents and formed the company. You can see our pathway along the go-ahead here. It was at least till 2005 before we had first serious commercial partners that we could be entering into product development with. So we launched in catheters, and I'm very, very pleased to say we started a partnership in 2010 with Fresenius to incorporate these things in dialysis membranes. If you've ever seen a dialysis membrane, it's got about 5,000, 6,000 hollow fiber tubes running up the system. If you have to go do wet chemistry on every single one of those tubes and then bundle the thing together, the price would be exorbitant. So now we have an additive that gets incorporated into the polymer feed, and as the hollow fiber is made, the additive blooms to the surface. And we just finished first-in-man studies in November. It's very exciting. This product's going to be coming on the market in the near future, and will have global impact for the company. So another example, so I'm switching gears here just to show you this is not a flash in the pan. This is a culture. If you look at the problem this way, you can repeat this solution again and again. In the area of tissue fillers, and specifically in the area of patients who have breast cancer tissue removed either for lumpectomy or whole breast, there's huge opportunity. There was a desire to explore the possibility of try to encourage more use of fillers in patients with lumpectomies, because the surgery is less dramatic, there's less tissue lost and whatnot. And the reason why many women opt to have full breast removal as opposed to just a lumpectomy is that a lumpectomy creates a defect in the breast, and you rapidly lose aesthetics because of fibrosis occurring around the material. So we had a concept. We wanted to take a concept and speaking to the surgeons that were interested in having a filling material that could be easy to use in non-bio, but be productive and interactive with the body's immune system to quiet down that whole fibrosis process. So the initial inflammation that leads to fibrosis, to try to quiet that down. That's usually a classical reaction of foreign bodies. And how do you make a foreign body material that doesn't react as a foreign body? That was the challenge put forward to us, as opposed to using off-the-shelf and off-label products based on materials that existed out there already, like PLGA, metal scaffolds, and whatnot. These are all materials that were being used in different applications, some biological in nature, that really were just not tailored to the unique filler application and the unique demand for perfect aesthetics, because this is what we're trying to halt, is the deformation of the breast, which becomes a very psychologically challenging issue for these patients. So we conceived of a chemistry, again, that incorporated ionic groups, hydrophobic domains, and degradable degradable polar non-ionic functionality, again, to replicate protein chemistry. And the whole concept here was to create a chemistry that, when interacting with key plasma proteins that are instrumental in activating the inflammatory response, that denaturing of those proteins wouldn't happen. Therefore, the human white blood cells flowing around the blood would not recognize these materials as foreign, and we would not incite the outstanding fibrotic processes. And so what I'm showing to you here is a comparison of tissue culture polystyrene, either not coated or coated with fibronectin or IgG, two proteins that are very, very important in guiding and identifying foreign body reactions to biomaterials, and comparing that to one of the formulations in this particular material. You can clearly see these are human white blood cells that were seeding onto these surfaces. It doesn't matter whether I'm not coated or I'm coated with these activating proteins here on the defined materials, that there is no activation. There's no outstanding activation of the inflammatory state of those cells. Here, tissue culture polystyrene, yes, a material that loves adhering cells, but activates the crap out of human white blood cells that are designed to enable the innate immune system. You can see that when I go from non-coating to fibronectin and IgG, that the activation, the adhesion level is just through the roof. And it really doesn't matter if you do this in the presence of serum, you do this in presence of autologous human serum or fetal bovine serum. The story is the same, and you can see that transformation with those proteins interacting with the surface is the same. So now we had a material that we can make small enough, we can incorporate it into the surgical process. Everything can be done at the time of the lumpectomy process, and we studied that with pigs. And just to show you some of the key images here, remember the goal is to implant this material as a filler and hold shape and form. So this is with the Real Fix material that we called it. This is the commercial material here versus without. And you can see a complete collapse. We can't see the curvature of the region of the implant here anymore. It's almost completely collapsed. And this is what we're trying to preserve. Okay, so polymers was formed with a material that was built for all these design parameters at the beginning. These are not typical things that a chemist or a chemical engineer, research chemical engineer in biomaterials would be thinking about early on, but now they become design parameters, concept parameters that need to be considered at day one, right at the beginning. So again, forcing the science to accommodate the needs of the device as opposed to the opposite. And just to talk about the entrepreneurial and commercial opportunity, this is a much smaller opportunity than the interface biologics play. It's an important one. The global market, the North American market as a whole, if I could tackle and get all lumpectomy patients, is on the order of a few hundred million. It's not on the order of $1 billion, like the catheter play. And then if you do your TAM-SAM sum analysis, we need to anticipate people who would be willing to have a foreign material put into their body, and then those who ultimately actually decide to make such a change upon a lumpectomy. So the market is pretty small. This is something that the company is struggling with right now, and so we're looking at it as a much more broader filler, so that we can capture a bigger number and attract investors. So similarly, we're getting obviously a little bit smarter at the game. It took me 20 years to create interface biologics and the huge impact that it has achieved on the market. As we gain this knowledge of how this process goes, we start to move a bit faster. Science was done 10 years beforehand, so you still need to do science. Always remember, if there's any government person out there who's just saying, we just need to fund industry university programs. No, you need to fund science, but once we have the science, we need to redesign and reconfigure that science for the application. So from 2016 till now has been the pathway of this particular company. I'll show you one last example, as this one is moving really fast. There's a company called Cohesis spinning out of my lab. The problem here is the surgeons would like to move away from plates and screws for craniofacial repair, where the bone is really, really thin. What happens, they end up smashing bone and damaging quite a bit of bone and drilling holes in with screws. The screws crack. The surgeries are long. This is a big, big challenge. So how do you design a material from scratch to achieve this and bypass, coming up again with concepts? The whole reason why we have metal plates and PLGA as the solution to current craniofacial applications is because they were successful in long bone applications, and people just took it and kind of forced it into an application in craniofacial repair. But what if we thought about how thin the bone was, how challenging the surgery, the fact that which renders using plates and screws really a challenging problem. And I'm just going to, just to give a visual here so you can see, this is the current state of art. Screws, all these screws and these plates, and they're there permanently. Could you come up with a material that could reduce the drilling, could reduce the discomfort, could degrade, and hence reduce ultimate costs? Okay, because it's costly to engage in this. So these were our focus: fast curing, controllable, resorbable. We came up with the concept of bone tape. And we borrowed something like many others from the marine muscle technology, except for we apply this without solvents. We wanted to increase high biocompatibility into this system. So we use a very different form of manufacturing bioadhesives so that we can make this very scalable, very easily manufactured, easily applied. The concept is bone tape. So rather than drilling holes now, surgeon comes in and basically scotch tapes together the craniofacial application area. So the materials exist. We've decreased the fixation time and complexity, improved. We are just in early animal trials, so we are not here in the patient play. But this has really captured the imagination of investors and backers, and so the pathway here has been very fast. The science was done in about 5 years. Company was formed around 2017 here. IP submitted, and we are here. We got our first investment round last year, $2 million, and the company has spun out. Okay, so hopefully that conveys to you the concept that I wanted to drive home of tailoring the science to the application as opposed forcing science into an application. And I make the case for doing this through entrepreneurship. For Canada and many other jurisdictions in the world, because this lecture is open to many jurisdictions, but can move beyond its conservatism that it has, can put to power all that science and discovery that they had, and they can do it through entrepreneurship. What is an entrepreneur? Many are beginning to know, but there's still a long ways to go before it becomes an embedded culture throughout our universities. Individuals who can identify opportunities, sit there and listen, talk to end users, many end users, and identify real opportunity, and then allocate and think of the resources that they can use to create value, not just to fix the problem, create value. In healthcare, to go back to what I said at the very beginning, we cannot continue to afford to drive up the GDP consumption of healthcare in Western societies. It's impossible. It's non-sustainable. So how do you do this and drive costs of product down, but without compromising efficiency is the challenge. The concept that entrepreneurs are only young minds, so for all the senior, mid-career faculty who are out there, you should take solace in the fact that the average age of entrepreneurs in successful high-growth firms is 40. Doesn't mean that there's not a lot of in the 20 to 40 age group that do it. There are many that do it. It's just that it is not an age-dependent process. So my argument is that faculty who are running research labs should be advocating for it, even if they don't want to do it themselves. They should be enabling this to happen. The number of young grad students who come to me and say, I really want to do this, and I can do this, but I can't tell my supervisor I'm doing this, is crazy. Because the upside of doing it, the upside of allowing your students to be engaged in this process is that 5 years, 10 years down the road, when they have a product, they are now the company, and they're going to come back to the university and its resources to drive their product development, become your industrial partner for your MyTax grant, your NSERC I2I grant, your translational grant in CIHR. So it's huge value. Yeah, so that makes the case for the age. You know, what are the characteristics of an entrepreneur? How do we start teaching this and educating and culturing our students to be entrepreneurs while they gain their education? And by the way, my lab, when I do recruitment, the students who come to my lab come to me and tell me they want to do a PhD. It's not that they don't want to do science. They have actually chose my lab because they also want to acquire these translational skills that are listed here. The ability to hone the skill of recognizing opportunity, the ability to be resilient. We have COVID-19. We could bury our head in the sand here or recognize that it's a big opportunity. How do we do this with managing risks? There are always risks, and we need to manage them. Okay, when an investor puts money into your company on an idea, they're taking a risk, and you need to make sure you get them across the line with that investment. And how do you pick an idea, and how do you pick a solution to that idea that reduces risk? And then, you know, be very creative on design. If you're not creative on design, hire design people, and be very focused. Probably the most important of all these is be focused on execution. Learn how to set milestones. Learn how to be responsible for mitigating if you're slipping on those milestones. Those are all skill sets that are really important. So problem solving, these are all things that are taught here in graduate school. How do you take them and retool them to become an entrepreneur? Problem solving, iterative research process, reassembling, collaborating, asking questions. While we think inventions are flashes in the pan, actually inventions are ideas that have been ideas of flashes of insight that have been accumulated over time by making observations. And then one of the last slides here on the entrepreneur play is the solo play. We have, you know, if we go back, if we wind the clock back 30 decades, Scientists have typically been solo act. You are recognized by your achievements in the field versus the team's achievements in the field of science. Traditionally, that is gradually changing. You see much more big research projects that are getting the major funding. But in industry, if you decide to go solo, you're dead in the water, especially in this healthcare sector where it's a multidisciplinary field. The faster you can bring on experts, the faster you can bring on a team and work on honing this collaborative skills, the faster the growth. And this is data. This is assembly of data. I don't actually have data with error bars here, but when this was assembled, they had looked at hundreds and hundreds of companies and correlated their phenotype. And they saw that on de novo technologies coming out of labs, it can possibly make it as far as the efficiency stage, but without collaboration, without the willingness of the university and the researchers to leave the technology, get out of the university, get into the hands of the entrepreneur and their skills and their consultants and the large team, that things don't soar. And this is personally true. I've seen this now, and I'll show you some of our database, and I've lived this personally myself. And lastly, there are many days that I just start playing this area. A lot of people would love to sling mud in my face that we're just doing this for the money. Well, a survey of most entrepreneurs out there, you can see the data here. Most of us are doing it to have impact on society. And if we're not doing it for that, we're doing it as a personal growth experience. And while making money is critical to the viability of the company, it is not the primary reason for why entrepreneurs do and serial entrepreneurs do what they do. So the University of Toronto has recognized this. So what's the solution? How do you embed and integrate this culture change in academic institutions? The University of Toronto in the early 2000s started experimenting with on-campus linked accelerators. The two first ones that were on site was this Impact Center here, formed around early 2000s, and then the Creative Destruction Lab and the Hatchery out of engineering. There are now some 11 incubators on campus, and the one that I run is this one here, the Health Innovation Hub in 2014. And it's by no mistake that it was one of the last ones to form the university, because life sciences in Canada have traditionally been averse to mixing in the entrepreneurial experience with it. Just to show you the grand scope of things and why it's very important to be engendering that culture of those campus-linked accelerators, which is kind of around here, is that at U of T, there are some 300 to 400 courses related to translational science, intellectual property, commercialization, funding, human resources. There's a lot of people that love sitting in seats and listening to this story. At U of T, almost a third of our students, we have a student body of about 90,000 or so, and professors and so on. So our community is about 90,000 plus. About a third of us love sitting down, listening to this story. Change here at UT now, because this is about 5 years old. The relative six of that decide to join a campus-linked accelerator, explore the market opportunities, so on. You can see the attrition rate fall. So what we did with the Health Innovation Hub is we built a program knowing the psyche and the needs, commercialization needs of individuals. And I'll show you a little bit of a data from our 2019-2020 annual report. This is the team, needless to say. I've been involved in 6 startups in my career. So I bring that experience to the field, what works, what doesn't work, what do you need to do early. Andres Loris is an ex-IBM. He's a University of Toronto alumni. He was an entrepreneur in IBM. And then did 2 companies there, did another 3 startups in the real world. So he and I bring a lot of real-world experience to this, and Joseph Fehrenbach was a senior developer in 2 startups. So that combined experience is what has created our program, and then it's coordinated or run by 2 master's students. We deliberately chose graduate students from the life sciences so that they would understand our clientele and connect to them. And then we have a legal consult. Our mission is pretty clear. First of all, we take no ownership in the companies. And this is a big mistake that public institutions, hospitals, yep. Okay.
Awesome.
Okay. I'm very apologetic for this. So let's see. Okay. So I was saying our mission is simple: educate, enable, partner, facilitate. We take no ownership. This is purely philanthropic, although we are running H2I like a startup. It's just that it's a non-for-profit startup. And our vision is to have in the Toronto area 100 viable small to medium-sized companies that could be hiring our grads and recruiting and turning them into CEOs, and just have the machine continue to roll. And we're cruising along. We probably have helped put about 15 solid small, medium-sized companies in play. We have many, many more startups that have been invested in at the early stage field, and they will grow. They will grow over this next decade to do that. I was saying, very important that public institutions, hospitals and universities understand that it is the public dollar that has invested into them to make society better. And the concept that a public institution would be asking a 50% ownership in these companies that are spinning out to develop the technology is insane. A business-to-business relationship between any company in the healthcare sector consists, on a good day, a good deal, about a 5 to 10% royalty sharing with that bigger partner that smaller company might be making. So the concept that a public institution that will create no farther value in that company towards creating commercial product it had traditionally been asking for 25 to 50% ownership, makes absolutely no sense. And our university here is finally coming around to this. The hospitals are coming around to this. And when we do this, and when we have 100 companies all of a sudden generating about 1 to 2% royalty on their products and driving that money back into the university system, they will recognize the value of that. Our program is pretty simple. These 10 points I'm showing you here are the fundamental 10 points that Andres, myself, and Joseph have brought from industry back into play. And we bring these skill sets. Fail on any of these in the healthcare sector and your company can die. You can have the greatest technology since sliced bread, but if you don't have the team to execute on it, it's going nowhere, and your investors will smell this out right away. So we don't really care which of these you typically have as you move through our 4-level system, long as you have them and we get you going. Typically, the IP out of that public institution, and then they move on. We now have 129 client companies. We hosted last year about 56 events to support those companies' activities. This year we have 68 on board. We have 78 industry mentors, because it's not my colleagues from faculty colleagues who have the experience to be able to teach our companies. It is industry experts who have the ability to do that. And there are a lot of them that want to give back to society. Those companies last year generated $45 million into the system. And just to show you the growth, in our first year in 2014, we had 7 companies. I spent $40,000 of programming, and the companies made $40,000 with that. But by our 3rd year, we were in net profit. I was spending about $100,000 of programming, and the companies went out and made $250,000. 3rd year, they went out and made $9 million. 2 years ago, they made $20 million. And this past year, this is incremental data. This isn't cumulative. They injected $45 million into the Toronto region economy as a result of this. And we're supporting companies, anything related to health. We only do health, but those ideas could be coming from the business school, could be coming from pharmacy. The majority come from medicine. You can see here, a good chunk of them come from the applied sciences and engineering. As I said, the mentorship has been phenomenal. 1,200 hours of consulting expertise given to our companies. Anybody who's ever hired a consultant, anybody who's done consulting, know that in the healthcare sector, that's worth about $300 to $1,000 US an hour. So this is not trivial. We deliver on 4 key services, of which this is the most accessed one, the mentorship. You can see here, these are various different events that we run throughout the year and the number of people that engage on them. Some of these events are more tailored to the level 3 companies. Some of them are more tailored to the level 1 and 2 activities. So we have to spend very little money to get things going at the 1 and 2. And we spend bigger dollars on our initiatives for level 3 and 4. We do not have the capacity to invest. We only have the capacity to enhance and grow the story, and then draw in angel investors to invest into these companies. And so our partnerships is huge to drive this. As I said, our angels are both mentors and investors. The venture capitalists are mostly mentors because our companies are early stage. They're not at that venture capital stage, but they will coach our companies as to how to get to be a venture capital stage. And hospital partners are huge for early validation of the technologies, and community partners. We work with the other 13 or so campus-linked accelerators at U of T, and many industry partners who provide many of the mentors to us. We're agnostic to the area of the technology. It could be hardware and devices. It could be interventions. So that's drugs or devices that go in the body, or diagnostics that inform things that go into the body, or software. And you can see it's almost a third across the board. This is the profile of the companies this past year. You can see, I talked about that early stage. Lots of people are interested in sitting in a seat and learning about this process. When you move to level 2, that means you start using your personal time. You start making an investment into doing it. And this is really where we get the high intake. We have about 60 companies making up that level 2, and then they graduate into level 3. This is another huge area where the companies want to stay with us, stay with that support. By the time they're to level, they're among those big revenue generators. They're contributing a lot to that $45 million that happened last year. And just last slide, just to show you, this is a snapshot of our curriculum for the year. Some of these events are multiple events. So for instance, Accelera events, the Accelera 1.0 is an interactive lecture series, much like what we're having today, where there's talk and questions. But Accelera 2.0 is built by the companies in level 2. I call it Alcoholics Anonymous for entrepreneurs. Literally, we pick one topic. I introduce the topic in 10 minutes, and then we go around the table, and the companies say, I'm a committed entrepreneur. I have this problem. How can you each help me? So the companies start helping themselves on this. And we do the same thing for level 3 and 4 companies in this program. We did a go-to-market series last year. It's a 3-part series. This year, we're doing one on investment and so on. So on that note, I just like to acknowledge the many people who have contributed to the way I think about the world. And I should stop sharing, I guess, somehow. Stop sharing. There we go.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor Santerre. Inspiring talk, and we really learned a lot from your journey, and I think I'm at this right age to start my entrepreneurship activity. So your
both of you are. You both got much more colored hair than me.
So we got some questions, and I hope that we could go through them and answer them. So the first question is from Professor Amir Manbachi. You know him. He's now professor in Johns Hopkins.
Yes.
And he says that Dr. Santerre, Thank you for being a source of inspiration to me and many others. In addition to your outstanding entrepreneurial activity and your strong research program, you have always been involved in leadership roles as well. For example, you were the most approachable chair of the IBBME, the Department of the Institute of Biomaterials and Biomedical Engineering at University of Toronto, followed by success stories of the HY and etc. My question to you, what is your secret? How do you do all that at once? What's your advice for the younger generation inspiring to be like you? Thanks. And this is also like a very good question.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Amir. I was just on an email with Amir just last night, actually. Remain engaged with your network and build a network. Take the time to understand people who align with your thinking. They are your best champions.
Exactly.
And do not be afraid to will execute, who will not let you down. But if your network big and you take time to curate it, to find people like yourself, you are in my network. I would never hesitate to call up and pick you up on the effort, as I've done. I've sent students down your way to meet and get introduced to people, because I know that you align very close to my mindset. And I know if I gave you something, you would execute on it. But you must do this. And unfortunately, you must have a big network to be able to find enough of the right people that you're comfortable designating to. My first company I built, I realized quickly after that, juggling a professorship and a company is a very challenging thing. I could do it when I had lots of color in my hair. The last two companies I've completely given to my postdocs to run willingly, because it was about impact. For me, it was about impact in society. And so I had no problem giving it to them because I knew they would execute on it. Yeah.
Yeah, we lost your last sentence. So can you hear me all?
Okay.
Yeah. So thank you so much.
Can you hear me?
Yes, exactly. Thank you so much for your answer. Karim from McMaster University, he's thanking you for the nice and inspiring talk. How do you see the near future opportunities for startups in the therapeutic field in Canada? Are we in a growing or a decline phase?
Oh, we're so much in a growing, and the good news, we have so much growth to do. So it looks like we're on the bottom quadratic of the curve, but I showed you the data from the Health Innovation Hub, and that is just U of T. But you could see that curve. That is a quadratic curve, and the enthusiasm in the community for uptake on this is huge. If you pay attention to the feed lines tomorrow, because the Faculty of Medicine is going to make a tremendous announcement. And what we did is we just finished putting together a $130 million philanthropy raise to inject this money into companies and their growth, because we literally can't keep up to it. My operating budget for the Health Innovation Hub is $300,000. Now, $300,000 turns into $45 million. That's 150x return on investment. That is huge, and that shows you in the investment world, any investor would invest in something like that. And so governments are starting to line up behind the innovation economy. Universities are starting to line up behind the innovation economy, and trainees are starting to break the mold and realizing that they can have a graduate degree and become very successful in an industrial setting. You don't have to only choose an academic path. So all the right measures are there, and the world's got gigantic problems, and as I've already conveyed, our economic machine is almost bankrupt from the expenditure on healthcare. So the drivers and the needs are there, the supporters are there, and Canada is sitting on top of this gold mine of research and science knowledge. So it's all engines forward, and we need to ensure that the champions stay focused and go ahead. And another thing to buoy me that we're heading in the right direction, and this is going to continue growing, is the fact that COVID-19 has happened, and we have not missed a beat. We were offline for only 2 weeks in March as we reorganized on Zoom. This year, we're running our whole program on Zoom. The number of people who attend the Health Innovation Hub sessions has tripled. We're doing intakes of about 2 or 3 new companies a week. So all those are signs of tremendous growth. So it's very exciting. Always pleased to take a question from a McMaster grad, because of course that's my is where I do my PhD degree, and I always refer to McMaster as the university with the social conscience. So glad that you were here today.
Thank you so much. Talking about COVID-19, we got a question about how, in your presented cases, the time between research phase to global commercialization may take over 20 years. In a pandemic situation like COVID-19, what's your proposed solution to minimize such a long period for innovation related to the pandemic solutions or problems?
Okay. Well, the first thing is to set up campus-linked accelerators. The 2 last companies that I talked about, Cohesis and Polymers, shaved off about 6 years to the stage that they're landed at before investment happened in that activity. In the 1990s, I was floundering, trying to find mentors and support personnel and programs and people who could help me avoid making mistakes. It took me 10 years to do that before 2001 kind of hit. And even in the early 2000s, the expertise was limited. You know, I always remember, I love telling this story. One always thinks that the first best partner for your company is the biggest fish in the marketplace. But they are not your best partner if they own 85% of the market. What they want to do is actually keep your technology off the market, because if they have to introduce it on the market, that costs more money to develop. And so the best thing they could do is keep on making crap loads of money on their product that is inefficient. So we went to the biggest kahuna, and I did this 3 or 4 times myself, and now I teach this to our companies. You go to the smaller company who has manufacturing capabilities but doesn't have technology, and that are looking to grow from a single-digit share into even a low double-digit share, would just make their investors tickled pink on growth. So teaching those kinds of strategies is the first step. You could probably shave about 5 years off a 15-year process there. Building your team, building a smart team up, getting lots of knowledge, and making sure that you're actually designing a product that somebody needs. We all think our technology is great. We do our science, we've done a great discovery, we got a Nature paper or got a paper in Biomaterials or something, and it's fantastic. And the reality is that our concept may not even be the need. So you go out and talk to the best way of shaving down costs in the development process is to make sure that you are building something that a lot of people need and that you can scale. And if you do those things, obviously, if you're doing interventions, there's a regulatory pathway involved. So it's a 5 to 10 year play. If you're doing a non-invasive product like a wheelchair or something like that, you know, a super interesting wheelchair, or maybe some kind of app tool or something like that. These things can be done faster. In fact, our companies who are coming in with simple software tools are in and out of H2I within about 6 months to a year. Our companies who are doing kind of the sophisticated wheelchair or device system, 3 years or so, because there's still a regulatory hurdle, but it's not as invasive. And then in the drug world, play 5 to 10. But the reality is that most of those early startup companies are doing out licensing to the Pfizers anyway. And then they're taking their revenues and they're plowing it back into redevelopment. So they become a technology company necessarily, and not necessarily a manufacturing in goods company. And there's the range. So it all depends on you know what your goals are. I mean, Interface Biologics was a technology company pretty much until it's in. We just spun out a company called Ripple Therapeutics, and we just created our first prototype company where we're running our own very first clinical trial in Australia this coming fall, starting up. But we have signed up with a strategic to create the mass manufacturing. You know, building mass manufacturing from a small startup is a 23-decade play. But it's not the fastest way to getting your product on the market or impacting society. You gradually work your way that way. Cool thing about a technology company is that you can have very, very high levels of PhDs and masters in it. Interface Biologics has 30 employees, and 27 of them are post-secondary degree graduate people. It's like a mini university. It's very exciting. I'm still their CSO. I go in there on Thursday afternoons for my consulting time, and it's very invigorating. I'm learning from the company.
Yeah, indeed, it's a university because people find faculty after being a scientist in interface biology.
Mm.
So, Mohsen has got a question. Please go ahead.
Yes. Thank you very much. I mean,
yes. Yeah.
Can you hear me? So my question is about clinical trials. You mentioned that you do clinical trials. Your first clinical trial is in Australia. How do you choose where to do the clinical trial? Why not in
Australia has an amazing. Australia is very similar to the psyche is very similar to Canada. It's just that their government has decided to provide a lot of kickback support to clinical institutions who are supporting clinical trials. Here in Canada, we've only started talking about the innovation economy under the most recent government. We had it in the previous government in Ontario, and it was curtailed under the current government, but it's starting to come back. So if governments understand the innovation economy, they're going to support it. And they're going to encourage their hospital institutions. They have these institutions already. They're all set up with patients. They have the triage points. They're fantastically set up to run clinical trials. Why not reward them? And there's been lobby activity going on in Canada for the past decade, trying to encourage governments to get our hospitals into this game. And some of them have undertaken this. They're best partners in the Health Innovation Hub, but there are still many, many more who could, if there was good incentives for that to happen. In the early days, we've done multiple clinical trials with Interface Biologics as well. It's just that the costs are huge. So our model there was to partner with a strategic who would absorb a lot of the costs towards driving these things for it. It means we take a smaller percent on the royalties, but our product still makes it to market, and better off having a small piece of a gigantic pie than having no pie at all and going under trying to run the whole thing yourself. So it's evolving. But it's going to take new solutions.
So can I ask another question, Hooman, or there are
many?
Yeah,
please go ahead. Go ahead. Not questions, but please go ahead.
So sorry, I have another question about your IP strategy. patenting is a very expensive process, and then choosing the proper jurisdiction is always something that that puzzles me. We are trying to have our own startup, and then we are thinking about where to, to patent which jurisdiction is the best to start with. Should we go all over the world, or just start with particular markets?
No, you should be strategic. At level 2, before there's even the incorporation of a company in H2I, we start talking about the business strategy, the business plan. What is the product you're making for it? Who has that product? Where is it bought and used the most? What is the lowest burden to entry? These are all fundamental questions which cost almost nothing to get your hands the answers on, and they should be guiding your strategy on where to patent. Because trust me, if the business opportunity isn't big, it is not where the Pfizers and where the Medtronics are going to go first. It costs those guys a lot of money to market and sell product in jurisdictions. They will go where the big markets are. So you need to understand that. And then what you do, even though you may not have jurisdiction, right? Somebody, let's just suppose I had a technology for South Africa, and there's an opportunity in South Africa, but it represents 0.001 of the potential global market in the play. So the entrepreneur in South Africa who's interested in using your technology is not going to invest the next 10 years in figuring out how to use your technology to build a brand new product. They're going to go to you, and they're going to cut a deal with you. And they're going to say, let's do a co-development deal. You teach me how to use your technology, and the deal then is a percent royalty. So there's no license in play here. It's now a binding contract where, for me, in exchange of giving you intellectual knowledge to work in certain jurisdictions, and the contracts can be very clear, right? The contracts can call out, you cannot go anywhere other than South Africa or Italy or whatever you guys define. And then because then what you're doing now is protecting your ability to go out and sell the same deal to another group of people who didn't play. It doesn't mean that people can't copy your thing and go and do it, but the cost, we highly underestimate the catalytic, the kinetic energy required to actually get there. And while we think everybody in the world is going to copy us, the reality is to put a product on the market costs a lot of money, and to put it on safely and not kill anybody is a big risk that not every Joe is going to tackle. So their best solution is to work with you, because you're the knowledge place. But you do have to protect the where you intend to sell, where your business plan is telling you to go. So, obviously, U.S., Europe, China is being paid attention to. India for certain applications, but you don't protect everything. You don't protect technologies that are not going to be adopted very fast in a corporate jurisdiction if the healthcare system can't deliver it in the massive numbers. It's fine to say India's got 1.5 billion people, but if a technology can't, if the public system or even the private system can only produce 50,000 of those units of sales in there, is it worth the effort to protect the IP and do the translation? Anything that's in English is a no-brainer, because there's no translation cost. Where patent really starts to cost you a lot of money is when you got to translate it into Chinese or Japanese or something like that, and try to understand the patent jurisdictions, because different patent areas have bigger protectionism going on than others. So therefore, your allowed claims are much more narrow. So make sure you have a good understanding of how far you're going to be chopped down before you go into those jurisdictions. But yeah, patent cost is huge, especially for technology-based companies. at Ripple and in Interface Biologics now, patent costs are a huge piece of our operational costs. If you cut the salaries out, but just the task of doing the science and managing it, as the company matures, patent costs are expensive, but so is your revenue starting to come in at that point in time. So
great, thank you. It was a challenge that we were dealing with. It is a challenge actually that we're dealing with at the moment, and it was very insightful actually to hear from you. Well, thank you very much. I'll be in touch with you regarding the hub later.
Okay. Yeah, no problem. If Amir can email me at 10 o'clock at night from Boston for a question, and you can as well.
Thank you.
Mohsen, you are on the right age to be an entrepreneur, you know. So based on statistics.
Yeah.
So Dr. Trevor Mackey from Star Innovation Hub, one of our upcoming speakers, also thanking you for a fantastic talk and the fantastic H2I program that I have taken advantage of. So you know him probably. So I would be interested in your thoughts on how to break into larger markets like the US, coming from Canadian startup beginnings.
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's not if you are going to go in those markets. You are going to go in those markets. You are going to be global because there's only 38 million people in this country, in Canada. So there is no way you're going to really make a dent in the bucket to do your cost recovery. So you need to form your partnerships. Many of our level 3 companies spend time going down to the States, hook up with incubators down there, which expands their network and creates the links that they can't get from the local community up here. And vice versa, what we're seeing more and more of as the U.S. incubator environment and the U.S. angel environment starts more about Toronto, we're finding them coming up and visiting us, and they're linking up. And so then it's the task of the incubator to ensure that we connect to those. So out of our 75 mentors, I think we have 10 who are resident in the U.S. So they provide a link. And so one link networks in with 10 more links and so on and so forth. And go down to the U.S. and participate in the pitch competitions down there. You are just as good as what's coming out of Boston and California and Seattle and Minneapolis from what I've seen in my conversations and participation in pitch events there. And then you do the same thing with Europe. We're forming a partnership right now with, we were starting to form it with Manchester, fully appreciating that Britain would still be a member of the EU back 2 years ago. But that has now changed. Who knows what that relationship will be like? So we're starting a partnership up with a German group now as well. So we will link our accelerator activities with theirs, and that now creates open door practices to get our companies exposed to European hospitals, to European incubators, and support in that nature as well. So the short answer to your question: pack your bags, and I know that's challenging to do in a COVID-19 era, but it will end, and you will be able to pack your bag and go south of the border or go to Europe and get engaged in activities. Like I say, we're running that clinical trial in Australia in the middle of COVID. There was a lot of exchange between our partners there and us pre-COVID. All of that has continued on Zoom line, just like we're doing today. So we're closing an investment round on Ripple right now, right in the middle of COVID. Pretty significant number. Investors are in Europe. All got done over line. So there is no excuse. The resources are there. The only thing that limits you is really your imagination, your creativity, and the resourcefulness of your network.
Great, thank you so much. Mohsen, do you have any question?
Yes, of course. I have many questions, but I don't know how much time Paul has for before.
Still good for about 10 minutes, if that's what you.
I'll add one more question, because this is again another big question that I have. Since I mean, we are doing all through some. We have a startup, and then we are trying to commercialize a product in the area of wound management, and then it's. Again, it's always been a question for me. So we always go after big markets. Market size is big, multi-billion-dollar markets, and then we want to enter those markets. But the question is that what if there are many, many big players in that market? For example, wound care market is a big market, but there are so many like multi-million-dollar companies in these markets as well. What should we do?
Yeah, so I know that one really well, because when we formed Interface Biologics, we had 3 technologies, and one of them was an antimicrobial, and we looked at the wound market, and we walked away from it for that reason. So my suggestion is that you find a niche, unmet type of wound. It might be so in your TAM-SUM analysis, you will identify the global market, as you said, and then the tailored market that's really sweet to your thing, but there's so many players. But then there's a small one, called the SUM, that is a target area that you could own. You might not eliminate all the competitors, but hopefully you can eliminate quite a few of them. And then you validate in that area. Right? That's not your business plan. Your business plan is always the big market share, but you validate in that area. Your costs could be lower. You may choose that area because it's an easy one to get in. There's such a need for it that regulatory might be willing to open up its door to approve a product that really has great hope, but is an urgent need and might allow you to do a small investigational clinical study in 20 patients or so, just to see how it goes. These people are terminal. They're out. They got no other solution. They're going to die if this doesn't get fixed. So you get into those areas, you validate, and now you have something that 50% of all those other wound healing people don't have, and that is you have validation. You have demonstration that it works in a real population challenge, and then that's good enough to leverage you back into a little bit of the SAM group and start getting your marketing team, building your marketing team, and selling that product and gradually getting away at market. Usually most startups will get it to the SAM stage, and then they're going to need a strategic partner to get to TAM, because to get to TAM, you really need amazing marketing resources. Despite how dramatically good that catheter was that I showed you in the Interface Biologics play, we partnered with a small company. We had a low double-digit market share. The games that Bard played to keep us out of the market, marketing-wise, nothing to do with science, nothing to do with logic, nothing to do with the health of a patient, nothing to do with the benefit for the economy. But what they were able to do because of their size and ability to bundle multiple products and the massive sales force they had just made it impossible. So you do have to recognize when it's time to hand it off or have a strategic partner to go after the large market. And you may have to do that 2 or 3 times over 10 years to generate enough money in the coffers to actually try to go all the way yourself. I've been at this for 25 years and I've not gone all the way myself, and nor have my companies, but they've grown very, very well, and we've had huge impact and done great things. So it all depends what you're chasing down, but you don't have to be the one who lands on Everest. I think we're all proud of the achievements of Hillary and mountain climbers that make it to Everest. We still turn on the TV to watch the story. We know how it might finish, but we continue marveling at how great that achievement is, and that makes us feel good. So even if it is a larger partner who finally climbs Everest with the TAM market, you will always be able to have the right to say, as you sit on the fishing dock in your later years, wow, look what we did. Look what we started.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Santerre. It was really our honor to have you today in our e-seminar series, and we learned a lot from your inspiring talk and journey. And I hope our audience also benefited from your talk, and they did, because they are in the chat box. We could see that they're thanking you. And so before close the session, I would like also to remind everybody that we continue our let me just share my screen, some information. Yeah, so we continue our seminar series next week, next Wednesday at noon Eastern time, with Professor Milica Radizic, one of my mentors, and she will talk about instructive biomaterials for healing and regeneration. And she's also a serial entrepreneur like Professor Santerre. And so we'll see you at the same time, same place for her talk. And by that, I would like to also thank our sponsors, Montreal Transmedtech Institute and MedTech Talent Accelerator. And again, I would like to thank Professor Santerre for his time and his inspiring talk. And and thanks everybody for joining us.
Very good. Yeah. No, thank you very much. Great to have had
a
the
great day.
Yeah. Bye-bye now.
Bye.
Okay.